So for me, this whole question of sustainability, as soon as I got to China, changed from one that focused on nature and humans in a context of wealth to nature and humans in a context of poverty. And in particular, that core question of development, right? So how do you create wealth in a poor society without destroying the environment? Alternatively, is it okay to destroy the environment if you're creating wealth for poor people? And these are the questions that my organization continues to balance. So this is some of what we do. You can see a lot of the brand names that we work with. You can sense from this list that I'm not the kind of person who criticizes companies just off the bat. I actually believe, and you can sense that our organization believes, that corporate activity in the world actually has some positive role to play. And these are some of the companies that we do work with. As you'll see as I go through my presentation, the fact that we work with these guys doesn't mean we can endorse the labor practices in their supply chains by any means. It's much more complicated than that. But you can sense at least that on the spectrum of people who either hate companies or love them, we're somewhere in the middle, but believe that companies have some role to play in positive efforts. We'll talk some more about that. Social auditing means essentially assessing the conditions that workers face in a factory. We go and we talk to the workers and we find out what's going on. And that's how we know the stuff you saw on the earlier slide that we published in Business Week. We also do training. The idea is that once you know that a worker faces a problem, you don't just walk away. You try and engage in some capacity building process with the worker themselves, with the factory, with the buyer, the brand, that all the tremendous number of labor problems, horrible human rights violations around the world. This young girl was found making bricks in southern China. She had been kidnapped from her family and sold into the infrastructure movement. So very important also as we talk about sweatshops, as we talk about labor conditions, we talk about the stuff, the way in which this interacts with us, we're not talking only about clothes and shoes and cell phones. We're talking about infrastructure like bricks. We're talking about certainly electronics. We're talking about food. I don't know if you've gone to Trader Joe's lately or Stop and Shop or wherever you eat. Trader Joe's actually started to say no to certain Chinese imports of frozen vegetables because they were concerned about high pesticide levels. The supply chains that we're talking about cover all industries. They cover the entire globe. They cover a variety of different sectors, and they cover a range of different problems. The key point, I think, is that they all offer us some way, some mechanism, that we can either benefit from the exploitation of others, or we can try and use our purchasing power and our knowledge to lead to the improvement in the lives of others. So you as consumers, if you're trying to feel good about what you buy, and you want to buy vegetables, you have the option of going to the farmer's market. There really isn't an option for you to go to the local t-shirt market, right? And there's no local cell phone production here in the Pioneer Valley. And so your options are really to buy something that comes from a faceless brand that exists globally, or not to buy that thing. So the core part of this conversation has to be, what should we actually expect when we're buying things? What should we expect of the companies we buy from? And how do we continue to put the right kind of pressure on companies such that they will gradually improve, they will use their leverage to improve working conditions around the world? You, I believe, talked about Walmart as a green enterprise. And so Walmart, the triumph of Walmart was to turn from an environmental pariah into a company that is celebrated on the cover of Fortune magazine, one of the leading business magazines. And I'm perfectly happy that Walmart is doing all this stuff. But if you really think about it, it's kind of silly that they weren't doing it up until now. Because each and every environmental intervention that they undertake pays for itself within a relatively short period of time, right? Turning off the lights, reducing the energy you use, reducing the level of gas you use in your fuel fleets, renewable energy as opposed to other energies. It reduces the cost of doing business. Unfortunately, the work that we do doesn't actually reduce the cost of doing business. And if you've been underpaying workers all along, if you've been cheating them out of wages, if you've been relying on for your profitability on the fact that they haven't gotten the amount of money that they need, you may in fact incur greater costs when the time comes to create a more ethical supply. Why do companies do this? We talked about on the environmental side, the corporate sustainability side. Companies are kind of silly if they don't engage in environmental protection work, right? They can save money. They can reduce their energy costs. What about on the labor side? What about on the social side, on the corporate responsibility side? Well, mostly companies engage corporate responsibility on the labor side because they're concerned about you thinking they have a bad reputation. They're concerned about their consumers thinking that they have a bad reputation. Reputational enhancement is really the main reason why a company might try to improve labor conditions in its supply chain. There is a kind of tenuous connection between labor conditions and reputation and business for a company, but it's really not financial. So they need to just have basically made a decision that they're going to do the right thing. They have to make a decision that somehow in their company they are going to find the wherewithal to potentially pay more and invest in a system of buying things from overseas that may actually cost them more, despite the fact that it doesn't pay for itself. Or is that they want to appear good to you, the buying public. Here's what you should be looking for as you go and buy things. This is my answer to the question of how are we going to know whether a sweatshop is good or not? How are we going to know whether Walmart is good or not? What should you look for when you shop, and what should you, as you proceed in your life as an educated citizen, as an activist, what should you hold companies accountable for? We call them the Fair-Made Five, and they are listed up there. The first thing that you should require of any company that you engage with, and indeed any company you go to work for when you graduate from college, is that the company is committed to being completely transparent with you as a consumer, both internally and externally. That the company commits to being honest with itself as it investigates its current practices. It can't paper them over. It can't engage in a PR obfuscation scheme. It has to be really honest as it investigates. It has to plan to use its corporate power and its corporate leverage for the benefit of people around the world. The company has to examine its own business operations. I'll give you a different example of this in a second. It means looking inside in a different way. And then ultimately it has to engage workers in their communities. I think if you look at this list, you can see how we might be able to say to the people who want to invest in Haiti what we would expect of them if they did invest in Haiti. We're not saying it's got to be perfect. And we're not saying that they should be criticized if it's not perfect. We are saying, however, that if you don't commit to these steps, you're not doing everything that you can. So I hope, if nothing else today, I've given you a sense of how connected you are by virtue of the things that you buy, if no other reason, to the rest of the world. And how by buying things, by thinking about consumption, by understanding your role in this complicated supply chain, you have some influence over people who are very far away who you'll never get to know. Thank you.